This is your cubicle. Not 3 of these here, as you can see on my right, just one of them. This will be where you will take the exam. All this cubicle has is bare walls and 3 planks of wood. 1 for sitting on, 1 for writing on, and 1 for sleeping on. Because this is where you're going to stay for 3 nights. I started out my channel with a mind to translating Chinese poetry, knowing more about Chinese poetry, and just sharing the experience of learning about it here. And what I found from reading about the Chinese poets' lives and biographies was that the exam, the 科举, was a central part of almost anyone's life in China. I knew it was very important before reading this book, but what I didn't know was just what it entailed. That was a mystery to me, and that's why I read it. I wanted to know, what was this exam all about? What did people have to do? What did they have to learn? And Miyazaki really was an eye-opener for me about this exam. Miyazaki estimates that in order to take the exam, every candidate, because of the nature of the questions in which you'll be asked to recall the next part of a quotation, every single candidate must have memorized 431,000 words, at least. That's just in memorization. Candidates were also expected to be able to write poetry. And then there was the pressure itself of just doing the exam. Your whole family may have sacrificed their earnings and their land in order to be able to pay for your tuition. There was no such thing as state-funded tuition. What's even more a miracle is that anyone who wasn't wealthy was able to take this exam. It involved at least 20 years of investment before any kind of payback for the whole family. That's why anyone passing this exam was such a source of pride for any family who even had a candidate pass the first entry-level exam and become a Shengyuan. There is the exam process itself. Now imagine, you studied all those years, all those texts, memorized all of them. And of course you're nervous. You've passed the first level examination to become a Shengyuan. That's just in your local district. Even that in itself is a victory. And you're invited to take the provincial exam in the provincial capital. You have to go to a specific compound used for this specific purpose once every 3 years for the exam. You are then subject to an inspection. All of your things are looked through. Every single page of paper, you and your clothes, you're padded down to check that you're not bringing in any cheating equipment with you. And finally, you're sent into groups towards your cubicle. This is your cubicle. Not 3 of these here, as you can see on my right, just one of them. This will be where you will take the exam. All this cubicle has is bare walls and 3 planks of wood. 1 for sitting on, 1 for writing on, and 1 for sleeping on. This is where you're going to stay for 3 nights. The provincial exam was 3 days of consecutive examinations, staying in the same compound. And by the way, your cell has no door. You have to bring your own curtain to keep yourself from feeling the wind or the cold or the rain. And bearing in mind, you're writing with ink and brush at this time. Can you imagine if it starts raining? You don't have a door. So there's you in your cell, and the exam papers are passed out and the questions are given, and that's you for 3 days. You're not going to leave the compound either. Food and water are passed in and out of the compound via a fence. These are excellent photos from the University of Bristol, I'll credit them here, of the Imperial examinations. Compound cells, you can see them, 1000s of them, like little cells in a beehive, all lined up in rows. Now, some of these huge compounds would have housed over 10,000 candidates. Can you imagine the noise of the ink brushes swashing all over the paper in every single cell, every nervous exam candidate snoring in the evening, perhaps? And these photos were taken after the dismantling of this system, so you can see some of them being left to rot for quite a while. Just imagining their pomp and ceremony when they were being used, they would have all looked a little bit more like the ones on the left there. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any photos of the cells at the time they were being used. Photography probably hadn't got there by then. So what about the actual questions then? Well, you'd be asked about the Analects, you'd be asked to memorize certain quotes following certain quotes, you'd be asked to write commentaries on them and memorize other people's commentaries on them. For example, the commentator Zhu Xi was a focus. You'd be expected to summarize his commentary on every single piece of the Analects. Remember, the Analects has over from memory 600, 700 verses, so every single verse you have to memorize the summary and the commentary on those verses. You'd also be asked to write poetry. Oh, but not just any poetry. You'd have to write poetry in a specific iambic pentameter following specific rules. There were rules, for example, which you couldn't write any character featured within the emperor's names. Remember, they had multiple names. Their title as a royal, their pre-emperor title. Any of those characters featuring any of those names would have to be written above any other character and in larger text. You have to remember all these things at the same time. At the same time as not being able to leave your pokey little cell for an entire 3 days. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Find out in part 2 what the next stages were. This is just the provincial exam. There was still another stage. Find out next, in the next video, what those next stages were and what those entailed in part 2 of China's Imperial Examinations Hell.